There's now an airplane flying overhead. It's always when you get to film something that the world seems to come out of its shell and decide, you know what, we're going to screw him over today. How about that? I have somewhat of an announcement to make, even though probably most of you have already seen it already. I have a new logo. Looks really clean, looks really elegant and really sleek, and I guarantee it'll look really good on a shirt. Stay tuned for that, by the way. But this video is actually not about the new logo. It's actually about the old logo. This one, the one I've used on the channel for quite a while. On my stream, I actually use this logo in a really cool cinematic opening sequence where it's a 3D version of the logo. There's 3D cameras, there's 3D layering effects combined with some really funny clips from my stream. And speaking of my stream, if you guys don't know, I do stream every single Tuesday and Thursday on Twitch. Link down below if you want to come and check me out on that and see the intro in action, which come to think of it now, it's probably not going to be in action anymore because I've changed the logos around. But anyway, it doesn't matter. A couple of you guys wanted to see how I made that intro animation, how I made my logo 3D, and how I used it and combined it with the other assets in that intro to make a really cool stream opener. So today I thought I'd jump in and show you guys how I made it. Let's get into it. Let's roll that intro. You know what? As a matter of fact, let's go back a bit. Let's actually roll the old intro. You know, just for, you know, for nostalgia reasons. Just for, you know, one last hurrah for the old logo. Let's do it. How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Sam. Hope you're doing fine and dandy today. We're going to jump straight in, and I'm going to start off the video showing you guys almost the finished product of how I made that animated intro that you saw at the beginning of the video, and showing you guys exactly what I did and kind of breaking it down piece by piece. You can see right now I'm inside of After Effects, and I have a couple of different compositions open here right now with different stages of the logo animation kind of playing back. But as you can see, if I jump into one of these little compositions right here, we have a couple of cameras here. We have 3D lights, we have 3D nulls, we have different layers, we have different parts of the logo, all broken up in this one area. That is pretty much an overview of what the project looks like inside of After Effects. But before we go ahead and show you guys how you do it, you need a couple of things before you jump ahead. Number one, you're going to need After Effects. Kind of self-explanatory, but it is what I use to make the intro. Number two, I did this entire thing using Element 3D from Video Copilot. It's a plugin that allows you to do 3D stuff like this inside of After Effects. I recommend checking it out. There's a link to it down below. It's not going to be a full in-depth dive into what you can do with the tool. I'm just going to show you guys how I did what I did with it. But the link for all that is down in the description below. I recommend checking out some tutorials from Video Copilot if you're interested in learning more about that plugin. And number three, the animation type that I did, the kind of look I went for, worked really well with this logo. Your logo is going to look completely different to mine and have different kind of looks, feels, different kind of animation. So just take what I'm showing off in this kind of semi-tutorial, semi-kind of overview video, take what I've taught you, learn from it, and then use it to apply the same kind of thing to your own logo to make something for your own stream. I'm going to make a brand new composition inside of After Effects. So I'm going to click on the Create New Composition button right here, or I can go to Composition, New Composition, and it will load up the composition preview window or the kind of settings window for your comp. We're going to call this one intro. We'll call this one intro. How about that? With a width and height of 1920 by 1080, 60 frames per second, and then I set my duration to about 1 minute. And there's a good reason for that, which ties into the reason why I had so many comp layers, and I'll mention that again a little bit later on in the video. But for now, I'm going to click OK or press enter on the keyboard. And right now, the next thing you need to do is actually bring in your logo, and I actually have it right here. And I'm going to break my logo up into a couple of different layers, and I recommend you guys do the same. I have the actual back of the old logo, which looks like this, which is just the back plate or the kind of the outline for the S and the film strip. And then also have the front of the logo, which includes the S and the red kind of solid that exits and kind of wraps around the S like that. Those are the two main layers we're working with, but we actually need 3 layers. So I want to break this down into 3 main components. I want the S on its own, the solid, the red solid here on its own, as well as the actual background itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make a couple of different mask layers that we can use inside of the Element 3D and to create our 3D objects. So what I'm going to do is click on this front part of the logo here, and I'm going to turn it into a mask. And I'll do that by going to the layer menu and then clicking on auto trace. And what that will do is it will create a mask version of our logo. If I click OK, you can see it creates a mask version of our logo. And it's just a white solid with all these mask lines that kind of outline the shape of the logo. The next thing I'm going to do is actually make 2 copies of these. So I'm going to go to Edit, and I'm going to click on duplicate on the mask layer. So we have two mask copies right here. What I want to do is actually focus on the top one right now. So I'm going to turn off the one underneath and just focus primarily on the top layer. I'm going to press M on the keyboard, and that loads up all of the mask properties for this solid right here. And what I want to do is I want to make a layer where it's just the S on its own. So I'm going to find where the S shape is, and you can see this purple mask layer right here. I'm going to basically leave that alone and delete all of the other masks in this solid, and we just have the S on its own like so. And I'm going to rename the layer by pressing enter on the keyboard, and I'm going to call this one S. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the one underneath, the layer underneath. I'm going to go into here, press M, and I'm going to do exactly the opposite, and I'm going to delete the purple layer so I just have the outside of the logo like so. So we should have two layers to this. We should have the S and then the outside layer like that. And I'm going to call this one the frame, so we're going to press enter. Let's call this one frame, and then the final layer is basically the back of the actual logo. So I'm going to turn these layers off, turn this backing one back on, go to layer, auto trace, and I'm going to click OK. And then what that will do is I'll create masks for all of these layers. I'm going to rename this one to be back like so. And it doesn't really matter what layer order this works in, because we're going to be using Element 3D for the actual positioning of the 3D layer. And then what I'm going to do is actually delete the original logo copies. So the original PNGs I have here, we don't need them anymore. They serve their purpose. We can get rid of them. And then for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide all the layers just so they're out of our view. And then I'm going to create a new solid. I'm going to layer, new solid. And this one's going to be our Element 3D layer. So just call this one Element, like so. Click OK. And then over in the effects and presets area right here, I'm going to type in Element, like so, and I'm going to double click it to load it into that solid. Then what we need to do is actually tell Element 3D to find these mask layers, because what we're going to do is use these as the kind of base for the 3D models inside of the plugin. So under the Element 3D effects controls panel here, we're going to click on custom layers, custom text and masks, and then on path layer 1 we select the S, path layer 2 we select the frame, and then path layer 3 we select the back. It's kind of a whatever order suits you best. I like to go in order of kind of hierarchy, so the S is first, the frame is second, and the back is third. Again, it's up to you how you want to do that. And then the next thing we're going to do is click on the scene setter button right here. That will then load up the Element 3D compositing window. And what we're going to do very simply is then click on this little text button over here that says extrude. We're going to click on that, and as you can see, it's made our first solid like so. It's made the S shape like that. Now we're just going to do that 2 more times to do the other parts of the logo. We're going to click extrude again, and then extrude again. So we're going to name the top layer. We're going to double click this. We're going to call this one S. The one underneath that, we're going to double click, and we're going to call this one frame. And then we're going to double click the last one, and we're going to call this one back. And in each of these, obviously there's no, the model has not changed. It's not changed shape. It's still the S. We need to go into each one of these and assign them to the correct custom layer that you assigned in the custom layer area right here. So we click on the solid, and then under custom path right here, under the extrusion, you click on custom path 1. You then change that to whatever you want to do. So under frame, we then change that to custom path 2. And as you can see now, it's actually filled in the other part of the logo. Click on the back and then change from custom path 1 to custom path 3. Once you've done that, you may notice just this massive gray solid object staring back at you. And don't worry, we're going to get to all of the color properties and all the kind of customization in just a little minute. What I want to do first though is actually fix up some of these holes, and I'm going to go into the back's bevel right here, and I'm going to click on expand edges, and I'm going to expand this out just a little bit more like so, until we get a roughly clear look like that. The next thing we're going to do is then assign all the colors. I'm going to go to the presets down here, and then I go to the physical shaders like so, and then what I'm going to do is actually drag on this red paint texture right onto the frame of the logo like so. And that's pretty much the shader that I use for the final actual animation. And then I'm going to scroll down a bit and find the black gloss one for the backing, and drag that and click that and let it go on the actual background. And then on the S shape right here, and I'm going to click and drag that over and put that on the S shape. The S shape is kind of hidden right now because we've expanded all of the edges and we kind of tidied up how everything looks. There's no depth right now to this logo. So what we're going to do is going to play around with the position of the backing just a little bit. If I click on this little blue arrow here, you see these position arrows. Z is the one you're looking for. If I click and drag that and pull it back, you can now see we've revealed the S part, the white part of that logo. As you can see, once we've done this, actually creates this kind of little bevel areas right here. We need to actually make this red part thicker. So I'm going to click on the frame and expand it to bring out the material. And I'm going to increase the extrusion like so and drag that out. You may notice as well, we actually have some peaking spots right here. So what I'm going to do is go into the back, tweak the actual extruded elements, the actual expanded edges just a little bit, bring them down again, as you can see. And now we have that back to normal. Then I'm going to just play around with the extrusion of the actual background. So extrude those edges a bit more. It plays around with the depth, tweak the position, and all that fun stuff. Play around with the S as well. At this point in time, it's pretty much just finding out what kind of works for your logo and playing around with the different extrusion paths, the different kind of levels of depth you want to have for your logo. We want to play around with how further forward the S's or how further forward different elements are. That's kind of a customization thing that I'm going to leave to you. And then from here, the next thing we're going to do is actually assign these to different channels so I can move them independently. You may notice in the original intro, there's different elements that kind of move forward and kind of work with each other. Like the backing of the black part of this logo actually animates up as if it's like it's being pushed through. You know those Play-Doh things you used to have, where like, you know, you put the Play-Doh and you push it down and it would make spaghetti. It's kind of doing that thing with this black mass area here. It's kind of being pushed through these little squares, and the black mass is kind of filling up the areas and the spaces in there. So what we're going to do is assign those parts to different channels and different kind of areas we can animate. And we do that by simply assigning aux channels to the different elements inside of the logo. So I'm going to click on the S part here, the main white solid here. I'm going to right click and then select auxiliary animation channel 1. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the back. And I'm going to right click auxiliary animation channel 2 this time, so we can animate both channels independently. And then once you've done that, you've pretty much done all of the 3D model work that you need to kind of get your logo looking exactly where you need it to be. Once you click OK, it will load it into After Effects. And now we're going to work with the lighting and getting everything looking nice and getting our lighting in the right position we need it to be in. So I'm going to click on Layer, New, Light. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a parallel light with an intensity of 100. And I'm going to click OK. When we put that in, you instantly get some light effects right here. I'm going to play around with the position and the angle of the light. Look, imagine this kind of dot here as the angle the light is facing. As you can see, kind of if I rotate it and play around with it, you see we're playing around with kind of the angle of the light and how it works. Put it in this corner right here, like that. And then what I do is actually just duplicate the light and move that around. So I'm going to click on Command or Control D on the keyboard to duplicate the light. And I'm going to play around with the position of this one and maybe go for something maybe in the bottom corner, like here on one of these kind of darker spots like this, maybe a little bit higher on that part of the S. That looks quite nice, bit of specularity. And once you've done that, it's then time to make the logo look pretty and introduce some shadows and ambient occlusion to make the logo feel like a solid object. And we do that by clicking on the element 3D layer, scrolling down to render settings. We're going to shadows and we're going to turn on shadows. The default one is shadow mapping. We're going to select ray trace shadows. And now if your PC or your Mac isn't as powerful to run ray trace shadows, it does increase render times. I recommend sticking with shadow mapping, but if you're looking for the extra crispy shadows and the extra little bits of goodness you need, then ray trace is the one that you're after. Do the same thing for ambient occlusion. We're going to click on that, enable ambient occlusion, and select ray traced again. As you can see, what happens is you may notice that the dark parts of the logo get instantly darker because it's creating shadows within all those nooks and crannies, all those areas. If I zoom in just a little bit and increase the quality of this and I turn on ambient occlusion again, you will see instantly what happens when it comes to the shadows. You can see here there's like more depth. It just feels like it's a real object at this point, and it adds a lot of detail. And then once you've got all that pretty much set up, it's now time to add our camera and then start animating. I'm going to make a new camera by going to Layer, New, Camera. And I like to use the 35mm preset. It's a nice cinematic looking preset. And make sure there's a 2-node camera for a very good reason. I'll explain why right now. What we're going to do is to change our views to our 2 views horizontal. I'm going to show you what's going to happen here. I have the camera selected right here. And you can see this little dot here on the camera is our viewpoint or our point of interest. Whatever that looks at, it changes the angle of the camera. That is important to know because when we start animating the position of this by pressing P on the keyboard, I can actually zoom in and change the perspective of what I'm looking at without affecting what the camera is aimed at. So the kind of subject of the frame is the logo, and the point of interest is what is keeping that in focus pretty much. And that can be useful for creating nice smooth zooms and pans and all that fun stuff. You can move the actual point of interest down a little bit and get a different kind of look. If I animate the position a bit more now, you can kind of see now we are now animating on this bottom corner down here. So that may be one part of the logo that you want to start animating first. So we'll do that right now. I'm going to add a keyframe for the position. Make sure my playhead is at the beginning of the timeline. Add a position keyframe. move all the way down, and then I want to just animate the position, not the point of interest, just the position. And if I zoom in or zoom out, you can see now that I'm playing around with how the animation looks. If I play this back, you can see now it's a nice smooth movement kind of locked in on this corner of the logo. Now let's say you've got this and you want the logo to start animating the depth, the kind of layer thing that I mentioned earlier with the aux channels. You go into the Element 3D solid, click and open the group into the aux channels, and now if you go to channel 1 and channel 2, you can play around with the position of your logo. So I do the Z space and use that as kind of the offset for the position. So I'm going to scroll right to the very beginning, add a keyframe for position on the Z axis for channel 1, and then channel 2 do exactly the same thing. Go to the end of the keyframes here. I'm going to add another keyframe. If you press U on the keyboard, it opens up the Element 3D keyframes inside of After Effects. Add some more keyframes here for our end position, and then go back and then adjust the starting point. I like to work in reverse like that because it makes it quite easier. Set your keyframes first and then tweak things afterwards. Otherwise, you're going to be chasing your own tail, trying to remember settings and copy and paste things and all that fun stuff. Set your keyframes, then go back in time and tweak stuff afterwards. And then I want to move the actual position of this all the way back. Move that all the way back. And you can see here what's happening as well. If I play around with the position of the Z axis here, you can see what's happening with that logo. And if I play this forward now, you will see we get some extra depth and movement as kind of the space here gets closed up. You can play around with how quick these are, in fact. Maybe have the white one finish first and the dark one finish afterwards, and play around with offsetting the timing and on that, kind of make for a bit more of a dynamic animation. And then it comes down to adding multiple cameras. And the reason why I add multiple cameras, and I do all of my work inside of the one composition to start off with. So say, for example, you want to have multiple shots cutting around the logo like I did in the finished video. What I did was I just duplicated this camera and then tweaked the keyframes for this top camera, because After Effects will only look at the layer of the first camera. It will only look as far as the first camera down. So if I tweak this position here and play around with, say, okay, well, I want to move the actual point of interest first before moving the actual camera. I want to animate this a little bit more up here, maybe play around with the actual position a little bit more and go, okay, well, I want to have a nice corner shot like this. Maybe play around with the rotation by pressing R on the keyboard and add a bit more rotation to it. Press U and then go back and play around with how this looks. See, I quite like that. It's quite dynamic, quite interesting. It's actually looking at just that first camera. You can see now you have two cameras here kind of battling it out and kind of flying around each other. After Effects is only looking at the top camera in this position. Duplicate it again. You tweak the second position. You play around with the anchor point or the point of interest, and you go, okay, well, I want to make this one go this way. And you keep stacking these cameras, tweaking the position and tweaking how they look. And then when it comes to building up that sequence, what I did was this. I made a new composition and call this one my intro sequence. And then what I did was I brought in that intro composition to intro. If we rename this to be intro 1, for example, I drag this in and then go, okay, right, I want to trim it. I want to start it there, and then I want to end it there. So I'm going to drag and bring that in like so. What I did was I just duplicated this composition inside of the project panel, and I open it up. I turn off the top camera and then go to the intro sequence, drag intro 2 down like so, and then go, okay, I want to start it here. I then want to end it about not as long, maybe just about there like that. Cool. I then go in, duplicate it again, open it up, and then turn off camera 2. And then once you've built up a massive layer of compositions like I did in my original intro sequence, you can then play around with their music, exporting it, throwing it into Premiere, throwing it into Final Cut Pro, and then playing around with the music, playing around with lens flares. In the final video in Final Cut Pro, I added lens flares and speed ramps and slowed footage down because you're working in 60 frames per second. Because you brought that project into a 30 frames per second timeline, you can slow it down to half the speed and get even slower, more dramatic movements and work with speed ramps and create a really dynamic intro. So I hope this helped break down how I made my 3D intro and how you guys can then play around with taking some of those ideas, some of those techniques, and then working them into your own stream intro or whatever you decide to make for your videos, for your stream, or whatever. And that is everything, guys. I hope you found this video helpful and useful in some way. If you have any questions about what I mentioned, or want to talk more about this kind of thing and run some ideas past me, then feel free to jump into my Twitch chat. I'm live every single Tuesday and Thursday. Link for that is down below. Or if you've made something already, you want to share it with the wider community, get some feedback and have some creative discussions around it, then feel free to join the Discord. The link for that is also down in the description below. And I hope you guys have some fun and enjoy making something really cool for your stream. And until next time, you guys take it easy. Love you. See you later. By the way, guys, you've probably already seen the thumbnail to this video, but a little tip for you. If you are recording a video like this and you want a really cool dramatic thumbnail and you want to get yourself like doing like a really like, oh my gosh expression, here's a little tip for you. Just say the word wow, and then halfway through the video, pause and grab a still frame. Watch this. Wow. See what I'm talking about? You're welcome. Have a good day.